Welcome to the funnest panel of the afternoon, because we're talking about Bitcoin as a means of payment, and more importantly, how we onboard future generations of people to finally join the party. So with me today are three people with very distinct backgrounds who have very different opinions on how Bitcoin's useful today and how we're going to go and get people on board in the future. But I want everyone to tell their story. So I'm going to start with mine, and then I'd love the gentleman to my left to do the same. I discovered Bitcoin in 2013. So in 2013, Bitcoin went from $7 to about $1,200 in the span of 1 year. And it was during this period of time that you saw mainstream media for the first time talk about Bitcoin as something more than a joke. In 2012, 2011, it was theory, pure theory. But in 2013, you saw some people making money for the first time. And consequently, people were able to talk about the elements of Bitcoin, how Bitcoin worked, what Bitcoin meant, and what it meant ideologically as well, beyond simply as a means of payment or a store of value. And it was there during the run-up that I learned about it. But I didn't start working in the industry until 2014, when I met the CEO of a Bitcoin exchange and started working with him. And I decided to devote my life to the industry in 2015, and it's been a crazy ride ever since. So you don't get to hear a lot of origin stories these days, how someone discovered Bitcoin. So let's start with talking about, Alex, how did you discover Bitcoin?
So I was at a bar, I think is how most of us discover Bitcoin. And I randomly met Ryan Shea, founder of Blockstack, and he was like super early in his like Bitcoin journey. And I think after a few drinks and a few hours, he was just like obsessed at this point. And I was building my last company, it was called Cosmic, and we built this e-commerce gateway that let retailers sell their products anywhere and consumers buy anywhere. And we were on this mission to democratize commerce. And everything that Ryan was telling me at the bar about the democratization of commerce was native to Bitcoin as a currency and a store of value. And so I just immediately became like obsessed, and then put it in our Slack channel for our team. We looked at like, how do we integrate this into payments? Never made sense into payments at least 5-6 years ago. We ended up growing the company, ultimately getting acquired by Ebates. And then after we parted ways with Ebates, we started to look at how do we apply Bitcoin, like what's the biggest problem in the Bitcoin space? And in my opinion, it's adoption. How do we get it to more people? So we basically built Ebates for Bitcoin, making it really, really easy for everybody to earn Bitcoin when they shop online, and hopefully solving the distribution issue.
And that company's called Lolli.
Lolli, yeah, Lolli.com.
Okay. Nimrod.
Nice. So my background is software development. I started as a developer.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. So I started my way as a software developer, and later on I had a software services company, and I was always into what's cool, what's hype, what's interesting. I bumped into Bitcoin white paper in 2012, and I just really loved it. It looked like, I don't know, code poetry. Seemed like really elegant, and during my days as a developer, I did quite a lot of integrations for payments and payment-related stuff, so I knew a lot about how the system works and how screwed up it is. And I think most people who started their way in Bitcoin those days were more on the ideological side than on the let's make a quick buck side. And it seems to me like the first opportunity of actually disrupting, I mean, this word has been used way too much, but still disrupting financial systems, that was the first opportunity. Because, I mean, if you look at history, no matter how any kingdom was rotten from the inside, if there wasn't an external force, it didn't come down. And by definition, there isn't an external force to financial systems until there was Bitcoin. So I had to do something in Bitcoin. And I absolutely agree with Alex that adoption of mainstream is key. That's why we do what we do.
So so tell us about Simplex real quick.
So Simplex enable you to make purchases of crypto with your regular credit card. The underlying technology enables us to provide it with zero chargeback guarantee to the merchant. So most of the people here are American, so I'm guessing you bought it at Coinbase. But pretty much anywhere else in the world where you can buy crypto with your credit card, it's through us. And we keep it secured to everyone. We take KYC from everyone, so we're keeping it clean. We're driving millions of dollars per day from new users into crypto, and I take great pride in that.
So you brought millions of dollars worth of people per day, you say?
Millions of dollars per day.
Into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, Raghav, tell us your story. How did you get into this?
Yeah, I was just trying to play it back in my head as when you asked that. And so I first learned about Bitcoin, I think it was March or so of 2009. And
2009.
Yeah, so I was an avid reader of Slashdot back then because I've always, loved new technology stuff. And so I saw this thing, and it's like, oh, internet money, and sounded kind of cool. And I didn't get right into it, but I kind of kept an eye on it because it was interesting to me. And at the time, so I'm an engineer by training, and so at the time, it was more, for the first couple of years, it was more from the perspective of microtransactions and private transactions, censorship-resistant transactions, that kind of stuff. And I remember I actually had a note to self in 2009. I'm like, oh, you can mine this thing? Maybe I'll try to mine it. I didn't, so I don't have a private island or anything. But I kind of kept an eye on it, and it was only around 2012 or so when I, got into the macroeconomic side of it, and that's when it hit me how big Bitcoin really can be. And that's when I started lobbying Fidelity as well, that we should be doing something. I was actually leading some enterprise innovation program at Fidelity at the time. So I'd be like, we're talking about innovation in financial services. We're not doing anything with Bitcoin. And so by 2014, and people were convinced, and so we started doing the Bitcoin stuff, and I built the mining operation at Fidelity and a whole bunch of other products that never saw the light of day. And I'm still at Fidelity trying to build new products and services.
So this is an important point. So you're telling me that the big giant companies out there actually have some true believer OGs too?
Yeah, man. More and more, in fact. So again, having been seen the whole Bitcoin journey at Fidelity. So earlier it was me kind of beating my head that let's do this thing, and then enough people were convinced that we should do something, so we started. But then right around 2014, which is around when we started, this whole narrative of blockchain, not Bitcoin, was also taking off in the media. Because before that, the narrative was Bitcoin is only for criminals and drug dealing and whatnot. And then they kind of shifted that into hey, no, it's not complete crap, but it's about blockchain and not the Bitcoin thing. And then the fight became no, it's about Bitcoin, not blockchain, because a lot of people internally were also blockchain. But now I find more and more. We have a bunch of my coworkers are here in the audience as well. There's more and more Bitcoin believers, both internally in our company as well as in the world, I think.
Well, I just want to make sure everyone here remembers this. In January of this year, Bloomberg Business Week had a cover, and it said rhymes with Bitcoin, and it was all brown. That was earlier this year. So the gentlemen here have all been believers since far, far before that, but all of you too, I imagine, were believers in this technology as well, and I think Bloomberg got it wrong. So what we should talk about what Bitcoin can't do, because all of us are believers. I certainly am. I think all of you are too. But it definitely is flawed, or at least I think it is. What's the biggest problem with Bitcoin, Raghav?
What's the biggest problem with Bitcoin? So I think, first of all, it's still super early days, right? I know 10 years is a long time, but if you just look how far we've come in 10 years, it's kind of insane. But I always allude to this thing. It's called the mother of all demos, which is this demo that this guy gave in 1968 about all these wonderful things that the internet will do, including collaborative document editing, live video chat, et cetera, and then it took 40 years to play out. So it may not. Hopefully, it doesn't take 40 years for Bitcoin to show its real potential. But right now, for most people, it's still cumbersome and hard to use. Securing private keys is hard for even cybersecurity professionals, let alone grandma. And people, looking at Bitcoin who haven't really kind of dug into it and realized the nature of money and all that kind of stuff, and also people who don't care about privacy. You see people using Venmo and actually adding on more information about where they bought things, what they bought, who are they paying, why are they paying.
Yeah, you have little beer emojis whenever you...
Yeah, so when you think about from perspective of that kind of person, it's like, I can swipe my credit card, it's super easy and convenient. If I'm, if there's any issue, I can do a chargeback and my bank will save me. Oh, by the way, my bank will pay me to use it because I get points and whatnot. Versus, hey, there's this thing, if you lose it, you're SOL, and you got to pay these transaction fees. People don't understand that those transaction fees are worth it because that's what decentralization costs and that's what financial sovereignty costs.
Well, they're not used to paying transaction fees themselves, but the merchants do that with a credit card.
Exactly. So from the average consumer standpoint, it's still cumbersome. But again, necessity drives utility, right? So if you're someone who's experienced capital controls, if you're someone who's experienced hyperinflation, if you're someone who really understands the need and cares for privacy, Bitcoin, you're using Bitcoin right now. And if you haven't gotten there yet, you'll get there eventually, because once you get affected, like even things with like identity theft, I personally know a lot of people who, wouldn't care about giving up their data, and they would call me a nut when I would tell them to care about privacy, and they get their identity stolen, and they come to me and they're like, how do I, secure my Bitcoin? How can I be more private? Should I use Tor? What browser should I use? So, everybody has their own learning journey, and again, it takes time to disperse this is like a paradigm shift in society, in my opinion.
All right.
So it takes a while to pervade through society.
But you look at Bitcoin, you say its biggest weakness is it's not a very good means of payment because it's hard to use. Is that more or less?
So I say right now, for the average person, Bitcoin is not the best means of exchange because it's slow to confirm, it's hard to use in terms of managing your keys and wallets and stuff, and there's high transaction fees, and there's volatility in price.
Okay.
So I think these are the things that are keeping the average consumer from using this as a day-to-day payment mechanism.
But let's talk about average consumers using this. So Alex, you've literally built a business about effectively giving, I'm not going to say giving away, but using Bitcoin as a reward points to average users. So for instance, I think it's important to note, today, Lolli announced a partnership with Hotels.com,
Yep.
which is pretty big news.
Woo.
So this is geared to the everyman, right? Not just to Bitcoin enthusiasts. What are they going to do with the incremental amount of Bitcoins that they earn with Lolli? And do you see a problem with this? If I have $4 of Bitcoin, I could probably buy maybe one coffee in San Francisco.
Yeah, so when I'm building any product, in particular with this product, Lolli, I like to think a lot about what is, and this is just a lesson for life too, what are people optimizing for? I think it's important when you do business with anyone, it's important when you think about users, and so when we think about how are we going to have mass adoption for Bitcoin, it's not just for consumers, it's also with merchants as well. And if we want Bitcoin to be the rails, we have to think about how is it better and to whom is it better for? And so for the merchants, they're the ones, as you said, that are eating the cost of the credit card fees. I think the stat that I last heard with Walmart is that they spend $5 billion in fees. So Walmart's one of our top partners, and from day one, I said, look, we're not going to talk about credit card fees. We're not going to do this giant hurdle, this giant technical integration that other companies, I won't name names, failed at with Bitcoin adoption and payments 5-6 years ago, which we all got really pumped up for, which sort of failed to see the light of day. I think that where adoption is going to come is when you actually serve the merchants and the consumers at the same time. So we're going into Walmart and we're saying, look, we have an incredible audience. This is a global audience that wants Bitcoin more than they want cash. I can go to Walmart and I can say, I can drive you $1 million in sales in the first year, $5 million the second year, $50 million in the third year. That gets them really excited. They don't even have to touch Bitcoin. They don't even have to, it's just a thing for them to attract new customers. On the consumer side, the more and more people that adopt Bitcoin through earning and little bits, it gives them skin in the game. And I think kind of touching on, but adding to the point you brought up earlier, most consumers don't know what money is. They think Venmo is money, when really it's just a centralized database saying $1 or one bit is moving to another bit. They don't really actually understand what's going on in the background and what owning money is until they get hacked, until there's something to do with privacy, security. So how do you incentivize the consumer? How do we incentivize any consumer? It's with rewards.
Right.
Every merchant, I think, in the US uses some sort of rewards system, whether that be Ebates, which we worked at, we studied for many years, or Honey, or any of these Retail Me Not coupon sites. It incentivizes people to shop at different places. And when you can incentivize someone with something for free that so far since we launched has 3x in value, you start to train this savvy shopper. like, let's just, like, one of our active users is this mom in Michigan that's telling like all of her friends about Bitcoin. She doesn't really give a shit about Bitcoin. Can I cuss? Okay.
Yeah.
She doesn't really give a shit about Bitcoin.
In San Francisco.
Okay. She cares about making money and having more money for her family. She cares about it as a store of value. Eventually, though, in 5 years, when I go back to Walmart and I say, look, we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users driving tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of sales, that's when we start to say, hey, it could be really interesting if you go back onto the other side and start to accept Bitcoin as payments. Then it gets really interesting because you have to reevaluate what they're optimizing for. You start to play into those margins of the $5 billion in credit card fees, and you say, look, we have a million users that are shopping at Walmart. You're spending, let's just say, $10 million on credit card fees on those users. What if we saved you $10 million in credit card fees by accepting Bitcoin? It's immutable. There's like no fraud. Maybe we work with Simplex for that. Could be fun. Yeah. And we distribute Bitcoin to more people because we offer them an incentive to pay with Bitcoin and then an incentive for the merchant to actually accept Bitcoin.
Well, this is presupposing, of course, that eventually Bitcoin's going to be a very good means of payment. I mean, maybe you're assuming that by that point in time, second layer solutions will be better, maybe that the miners will accept some of the BIPs that effectively make Bitcoin more scalable. Do you see Bitcoin as a means of payment today, or do you see it as a store of value, or am I missing the point?
I think it's more of a store of value in my eyes, or at least the future of Bitcoin is more on the store of value. I don't think I'm going to step into a coffee shop and buy coffee with my Bitcoins. And I just want to correct something which is kind of, I heard.
By the way, you literally can't use Bitcoin to buy coffee right outside in the biggest Bitcoin conference in history.
Yeah, because I told you before, I bought in 2013, I paid for a burger and a White Russian in Berlin. I paid half a Bitcoin. That was, I think, it was a good Bitcoin, but it wasn't like $6,000 good burger. So, I'm not sure I'm going to spend this on a coffee. But just one point which all of you raised, that the merchant is paying the credit card fees. It's not the merchant. Don't be naive. It's you. You're paying it. They're just pricing it in. And I think that's the fundamental part which drew me into Bitcoin, the fact that you can change the infrastructure of payment, of banking. If you look at the telephony companies, they kept on charging you, I think a decade into their infrastructure being voice over IP, as if they were still using the old infrastructure. So I think that the blockchain technology, blah, 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 or Bitcoin can actually provide the required push to banks, to financial institutions to start using a much better infrastructure which is transparent to the user and stop charging such insane amounts from us. And I generally believe in a multi-currency future. I think there will be other currencies used for you buying coffee and other usages or other currencies for each user. I do think that all of them will be around Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin as is great. I don't think it should change. I think if you look at, you're all using email, right? You know that SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, which is crap, was invented in the 50s. It's horrible. I mean, right, you get bounced, you never get read receipt, you can't recall an email. Nobody would write such a protocol today, but still all of us are using it all the time.
Well, that's because it had inertia, and this is one of the things that I think that Bitcoin has. Because it's the first, because it is by far the most powerful computer network in history, and I don't think that gets talked about nearly enough. That actually provides it with real value. So people ask all the time, what's backing Bitcoin? How do you respond when someone says that?
What's bad in Bitcoin?
What's backing Bitcoin?
It's not adopted yet. That's the only problem. And that's what we're doing, that's what you're doing.
No, what's backing it? What is the force that provides Bitcoin with fundamental value?
I think it's the only cryptocurrency which is actually decentralized. All the others are kind of...
So wait. So I want to make sure we drill down on that. You're saying that the fact that it's sufficiently decentralized is value itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because all the other...
That's a conceptual leap.
I think that all the other pseudo-decentralized systems are not really decentralized. I mean, if we're talking, for example, we said we're not going to talk about Facebook, but I am going to talk about it. So even their currency, with the nodes, So basically, you're just providing your data and you're just counting on huge organizations who already proven multiple times that they have no problem to stick you one, instead of properly decentralizing a system in a way that will actually provide you with some freedom.
So you mean decentralized equals trustless?
Yeah.
Okay.
Trustless is trust.
Alex, what's backing Bitcoin?
Belief.
Nice.
Belief.
Yeah, in code, unbreakable code. So it's a few things. I mean, what is backing any money? It's the belief that what backs the U.S. government? Like there's belief that the U.S. government has a strong military, that we have a strong GDP, that we have strong trade. It's this belief that when we're not our money is in a bank, and so there is this belief system that's being disrupted right now where I think the best thing that Bitcoin has done is it's caused everyone to ask questions about what money is. And I think Libre is one of the better things to happen to Bitcoin over the last 10 years, because it's wait a second, why do we need Libre? What is this thing? If it drives people to question what money is and what's backing it, and then you start to go down the rabbit hole and you realize that there's nothing really backing it but this belief, you get to pick what money you want to use. And if you believe that that no one should control a currency but you, and you believe in a self-sovereign banking, then that's the belief system that people get behind. And we all know there's 21 million of these things, and you can either get on board or not. We get left behind.
But do we really need to have? I mean, I would say to some extent I'm not saying talking out of both sides of your mouth, but you're talking about two different things at the same time. Your core users today are using a custodied service because they have to. They have problems with private keys. We've already talked about earlier. If you basically ask an average person on the street to handle something of value, they get nervous. They don't want to hold a gold nugget in their hand. They want to put it somewhere safe. So you're doing that for them. But at the same time, you're saying that Bitcoin can be a means of educating people and making them into the ideologues that pretty much everyone in this room is. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I think we all got the bug somewhere, and I think we're saying the same thing, that price and a store of value is what attracts people initially, and we're using that to find more believers, to find more Bitcoin adopters. But if we can drive attention to the price, then you can start to teach people about the principles of it. If you have some asset that goes up 3x, you're going to pay attention because you're wait a second, I only had $10 there, now it's $30. What if I had $1,000? What if I had $5,000? What if I started to devote part of my capital? And everyone's going to start to do that. Countries are going to start to do that.
Dangerous game, though, at the same time, and we've seen this before. Most of us have been here through multiple bear cycles, but it's a dangerous game, and it's a good way to go and get people that were on board before to be writing stories of how Bitcoin shitcoin in January 2019. But let me ask you this: we're here to talk about onboarding the next generation of Bitcoin users. And Raghav, you mentioned something earlier, which is that you see that probably the best way for us to go and get Bitcoin users is by trying to attract them from places where Bitcoin is useful today, potentially as a store of value and as a means of payment, and that might be in developing nations. At Fidelity, how have you been, first looking at the problem, and are you guys doing anything to try and solve that?
So, I wouldn't say there's one best way to go after it. I think everything, right? So again, like I said earlier, we're still in fairly early days, and whatever means it might be that you can make it easier for people to kind of, jump in, learn about it in any way or use it. For example, if people are using Lolli and they get rewarded some Bitcoin, that's an easy way to get it. They don't have to set up an account and buy it or anything like that. And then once they have it and they see it just triple, then they're they're intrigued. They're why did this thing just triple? And they learn more about it. So yeah, I think whether it's whatever, there's this vast different diversity in the types of people out there and what value they might get from learning or using about Bitcoin. And I think we need to attack it from everywhere, right? So from an investment standpoint, you have this idea of an uncorrelated asset that can help balance your portfolio. From a capital control standpoint, it's something that can help you escape it. From a privacy standpoint, it's something that can help you be more private. From a, there's all these different things. And to kind of touch upon what you said earlier as well, I asked earlier about what drives the value of Bitcoin. I think it's the utility that it provides the world, where it's sound money, where you know that the monetary policy is hard-coded and baked in, and it's not going to change, and you know if you store your wealth in this thing, it's going to stay there. And why? And I agree with Alex as well from a philosophical standpoint. The reason anything has value is because people believe it has value. But the reason I think people believe Bitcoin has value is for the transactional utility that it provides. That hey, we can pay people. We know people will accept it, and the payment utility and the store of value utility kind of feeds each other, right? Because the more people use it for payments, the more valuable it becomes. The more valuable it becomes, the more people are attracted to it. They learn about it, and they start using it for payments as well. And then kind of it's like a feedback loop that helps propagate that.
So maybe Bitcoin needs or already is employing a very multilateral marketing strategy, where there are all these different target demographics. Users in Venezuela require a specific strategy to go and attract them to get on board. Whereas people with large bank accounts or financial institutions want to hear that there's custodians and they can buy it through their brokerage, which right now it's very, very hard to do, and is yet another reason why we're seeing so much attention paid on potential ETFs and ETPs. A different story for regular retail consumers in the West who need to simply go through retailers they're familiar with and feel comfortable with so they can go and start aggregating Bitcoin in wallets. And perhaps for every other demographic, their own strategy.
Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of decentralization, right? There's, again, millions of people out there. A lot of them believe in Bitcoin. A lot of them are in communities where they can recognize what need Bitcoin might fulfill for that particular community, and they go out and kind of, show people how it can help them.
So let me ask you this. You're all Bitcoin experts. How often are you asked to go and help someone buy their first Bitcoin? And how do you do that? How do you do that today? And what magic trick would make it better for you to for that to be an easier process the next time?
I don't. I've never told anyone to buy Bitcoin.
Well, no. Has anyone ever asked you?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
I think born and raised in North Carolina, and a lot of people knew that I had gotten into Bitcoin, and so can't tell you how many text threads from friends from back home, or when I was living in the Midwest, started when Bitcoin started to get in mainstream media. I wouldn't tell someone to go buy stock. I've never told anyone to go buy Bitcoin, and maybe that's contrarian to this audience or crew. I believe that people should do their own research. I've sent articles, I send books, I send a million things, but I've never said to buy Bitcoin. And I think part of the inspiration for Lolli was that my own experience of my parents came to me and they were like, should we be investing in Bitcoin for our future? And I told them not to. I was like, do your own research and then you decide. But when they did decide and they started to set up Coinbase and it took them weeks to go get onboarded, I was like, well, that's not good. And then you just can't expect somebody to, less than 1% of the world would consider themselves probably investors, and I think that's probably a very generous stat. And so how do you expect the 100% of the world to adopt a new currency if most people don't even have the mindset of being an investor? You have to take something that somebody does anyway, and so part of the inspiration of Lolli is I imagine 99% of the people here, maybe other than I think Matt Odell doesn't have a credit card, but most people I think have credit cards and have some sort of rewards. And we think about points, but we don't actually think about them being deflationary currency. But Chase created their own currency with Chase Reserve points. Why are you investing in that as a point system instead of Bitcoin? So if we can position it as something that people know, and that's the best way for people to get into it. That's why we built it, so that I can go send my sister and my friends from back home a link to Lolli and say, look, you're going to go shop at hotels.com, you're going to shop at Walmart, might as well earn Bitcoin. It's gone up over time, do your thing.
Last lightning round question. Because Nimrod, you brought it up, I'm going to go and ask all of you. Is Facebook Libre going to help or hurt Bitcoin adoption globally? Raghav, you start. Personal opinions.
Yeah, so also I should caveat anything I say is my personal opinion and not the firm's opinion, for the lawyers out there and the press out there. So I think it's a bit of both, right? And it's hard to see how it's going to play out. Like I think, again, looking back in the 10 years, just see how far we've come. We have one of the largest corporations in the world, about to butt heads with nation states across the world to start a new currency where we're going to have more people kind of exposed to crypto for the first time. We're going to have, well-pocketed companies like all the 23 or so people, companies that have signed up for Libre to kind of, fight the regulatory fights as well. And so from that, there's a lot of positive, at least in the near term, that can come from there as well. Of course, there's some negative stuff as well that, at least in its current incarnation, it's not even a real blockchain, and is it a real crypto? And from a privacy standpoint, how private will it really be, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, a bit of both.
Quick answer, Nimrod.
I think it's going to help. I mean, look at the exchange rate in the, past couple of weeks. I think from 7 to 11 was just the publicity around Libre. I think that, Simplex being what it is, serving retail users, the biggest driver is absolutely good news. So it's all good news.
And Alex, final word.
I'm a big believer that stablecoins will be the best on-ramp into Bitcoin. It drives attention, and it creates this very easy on-ramp into teaching people about what money is and why decentralized money is important.
All right, well, you heard it here, guys. Facebook Libre, good for Bitcoin. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hold up, guys. Hold up. Sit down. So we have a Q&A board where people can submit questions in.
Oh, great.
But it's been infiltrated by Bcashers. They've been trolling us. So
Can't wait to see that.
if any of you own Bcash, let's just remind you, you own the shittiest of shitcoins there is. So on that, I'm just going to throw my question out. As we want to create the next generation of hodlers, how do we keep people away from a turd like Bcash?
I think, we see a very narrow part of on-ramp, but still I think it's a major one. The retail users, by the way, we ran a survey. I think 80% of buyers see themselves as investors, referring to your point. And about 90% of the purchases are of Bitcoin, so I'm not really concerned.
I've got a different answer. I believe in the fourth estate. So reporters matter. Where we need reporters to actually write investigative pieces, we need reporters to check sources, we need reporters to go and tell it like it is. We need that very, very badly, and that's why Bitcoin Magazine here is going to be one of the publications that's going to help figure out the wheat from the chaff, tell the population and give them the tools to educate themselves. Without media, it's very, very hard. Not everybody's going to do their own research. That's why reporters exist, and that's why we need to trust them.
And Alex, we don't stack sats with Bcash, do we?
There we go.
Why not?
Well, I think reporters are doing a good job with that. We have reporters who believe in straight up Bitcoin and Bitcoin Core. I remember the debate when Bitcoin Unlimited was coming out. This was the predecessor, effectively, of Bitcoin Cash. And it wasn't just Blockstream versus Roger on Bitcoin Twitter. What you saw was media going into the fundamental debates, getting into the technicals, and explaining that for not everyone who's a computer programmer. I didn't learn this. I can't go and read all the code, but I can read really great pieces in some of the technical journals.
All right. Huge round of applause for our amazing panel. All right.